Imagine that you are walking through a medieval city. You are dressed in wool and linen. A leather belt holds up your hose and your tunic is cinched tight at the waist with a cord. The air hums with activity. Women hurry with baskets of vegetables. Men carry bolts of fabric and loaves of bread. Dogs and cats slink between their legs, hoping for scraps of food. Your destination today is the market. To get there, you must pass between the towering structures of the city's hall, the church, the butcher shop, and the tannery. The shops are open, spilling out onto the street with their wares. Their signs hang from above, painted boards announcing the business within. Sounds fill the air, the shouts of vendors, the squeal of pigs, the murmur of shoppers. These noises blend together in a constant roar. The streets are narrow and dirty, and people bump against each other as they pass. Sometimes you find yourself nose to nose with a stranger. You hold out your arm and wait until he passes before continuing on your way. It feels wrong to be so close to someone without knowing them, yet it is unavoidable here. In this crowd, you cannot avoid the noise, the dirt, the smells. All around you are reminders of the reality of life in a medieval city. The stench of stale urine mingles with the rich aroma of spices. You catch a whiff of fresh bread from the bakery and the metallic tang of blood from the butcher shop. The people here are working hard to earn their food and their money. Each of them has a role to play in the city, a job to complete, even you. You have a part to play too. After all, you are a townsperson in this medieval city. You are responsible for doing your part. Your response ends when you are done, then it is someone else's turn. For example, if you are a baker, you wake up early to heat your oven. While the bread is baking, you tend to your animals. When the bread is ready, you take it to the market and sell it. From there, you go to the tavern to collect payment from customers who bought bread earlier in the day. You finish your rounds and return home to eat dinner with your family. Then it is off to bed. If you are a tanner, then your work begins with dipping hides into vats of tannic acid. As the sun moves overhead, you scrape and beat the leather, then dry it out to prepare it for sale. Later, you head to the market to sell your wares. If you are a barber, then you spend your days shaving and trimming the beards and hair of customers. At night, you attend the public bathhouse, scrubbing and bathing patrons. If you are a farmer, you wake up early to feed your animals. Then you head to the fields where you plant, weed, water, and harvest crops. After working all day, you return home to eat dinner with your family. If you are a blacksmith, you heat metal over your forge, pounding out horseshoe shoes and other objects that your customers need. Throughout the day, you hear the ring of your hammer on steel. As the Black Death rampaged through medieval Europe, killing millions, some survived by withdrawing into fortified houses. While the poor died in the streets and mass graves, the elite created safe havens within their homes, safeguarding their money, their possessions, and themselves. Now, excavations of some of these wealthy households are giving us a glimpse into the daily lives of medieval elites in the time of the plague. What do their houses tell us about how they coped? What did they lose and what did they save? Today, we will step inside these homes and discover the objects left behind in a hurry, and the stories they reveal. A typical house for a wealthy merchant or city official might look something like this. A large structure with thick stone walls, small windows, and a sturdy door. Behind it lay a series of rooms for family and servants, storage areas for goods, and a courtyard surrounded by high walls. This house offers shelter, security, and privacy. Yet today, archaeologists are focused on the domestic side, the rooms that reveal how a family lived. Enter the kitchen, probably the busiest room in the house. Here, hearths would be piled with pots and pans, tables covered in food and scraps. Servants move briskly, preparing meals for a household that stretches beyond the walls of the kitchen. In one corner, an overturned stool, its leg broken, perhaps knocked over in the rush to leave. Nearby, a tarnished knife rests against the wall, forgotten in the heat of the moment. Above the table, a single clay pipe hangs from the shelf, its bowl facing down, ready for reuse. On the hearth, a kettle lies abandoned, its handle askew, a pie cooling on a rack nearby. Outside, the savory smells of roasting meat and herbs mingle with the aromas of stale waste, animal dung, and chamber pots. There's no escaping the odors of medieval life. But inside the house, there are distractions. The sun streams through a window onto the floor where a chessboard awaits a game interrupted. On the opposite wall, a man looks out. His weathered face and coarse woolen tunic speak of manual labor, his leather gloves pulled high against the chill. On the table beside him, a quill pen rests on a wooden stylus. At the far end of the room, two women sort through piles of fabric. One adjusts her linen underdress, her patterned stockings pulled high. She holds a length of blue wool broadcloth, while her companion examines a piece of homespun linen, perhaps a tablecloth or a curtain. In the background, a servant prepares a meal at a small side table, tending a pot hanging from a hook above his head. He stirs the contents with a wooden spoon, glancing at the loaves cooling on a nearby rack. In front of him, a bottle of spiced wine stands ready for serving, next to a bowl filled with grapes. In a home like this, each room tells its own story. In the bedroom, for example, a luxurious bed piled high with pillows and quilts invites repose. In the corner, a wardrobe stands tall, its doors slightly ajar, hinting at the fine clothes stored within. Archaeologists also know that in this room, too, there were traces of hasty departure. A comb and a woman's ring lay forgotten on the bedside table, beside a broken vase with a dried flower still clutched between its shards. Even the privy offered insights, with items carelessly discarded, including combs, dice, and a book lying face down, suggesting a finality to the departure. Its pages had been read one last time. From these scenes we catch glimpses of a way of life, not only in the possessions left behind, but in the stories they tell. Take, for instance, the dice. They speak not only of leisure and entertainment, but of a culture of chance. In the late Middle Ages, games of hazard involving dice were popular among the wealthy, reflecting a society increasingly comfortable with risk and financial speculation. In fact, the most exciting finds came from the very heart of the house, the courtyard. Here, in the middle of the domestic sphere, archaeologists found coins, not merely scattered, but carefully buried beneath paving stones. The collection contained thousands of silver pennies, along with gold florins and English groats. It seems the family had taken just days to gather their valuables, hastily concealing them for safekeeping. Their plan was to return and collect them later, but the plague had other designs, wiping away not only their hopes, but their ability to fulfill them. The fascinating thing about these homes is that they offer snapshots of the elite experience during the plague, but also hints at the lives of those outside the walls. To understand the full picture, we must venture beyond the wealthy households and into the bustling heart of the city. Imagine yourself walking through the crowded streets, the sounds of commerce all around you, merchants hawking their wares, artisans at their craft, shoppers bartering prices. You come across a butcher's stall piled high with meat and poultry, fresh from the market. Nearby, a fishmonger displays glistening catches of the day, while a fruit vendor's stall bursts with the colors of ripe produce. A tanner's shop fills the air with pungent smells, while a baker's oven promises the warmth of fresh bread. Everywhere, the energy of trade, the rhythm of production and consumption, the pulse of an economy in full swing. In this environment, a new type of wealth was emerging. Guilds dominated urban economic life, merchants banding together to control trade and set prices, shopkeepers uniting to regulate retail sales, craftsmen forming powerful associations to oversee production and protect their skills. The city became a hub of industry, with workshops and shops lining its streets. In the heart of this activity, a group of men meet to discuss business deals, trade routes, and prices. They are members of a powerful trading guild, united by their wealth and their influence. At their center, a large table made of polished oak, laden with documents, quills, and ink. Around it, figures clad in fine woolens discuss plans for future ventures, oblivious to the shadow of death looming on the horizon. But not everyone's attention is focused on the bottom line. A young apprentice sits cross-legged on a stool, patiently copying accounts, his sharp eyes missing nothing. A wizened merchant leans back in his chair, lost in thought, while a portly fellow, his fingers steepled before him, listens intently. The door opens and a visitor enters, bowing to the assembled men. He, too, has news of trade and commerce, but also whispers of illness sweeping through the city. Still, the men press on, signing contracts, sealing agreements, their voices echoing through the hall. These meetings captured not only the economic vitality of the city, but its vulnerability. The plague would disrupt trade networks, devastate consumer demand, and throw entire industries into chaos. This Guildhall may seem like a microcosm of medieval urban life, but it is also a microcosm of collapse. The plague hit cities hard, disrupting the very systems that made them thrive. Streets emptied, shops shuttered, and guilds, once bastions of economic power, struggled to maintain their influence. All of these elements weave together to form a tapestry of medieval life in the time of the plague. It was a world of contrasts, of luxury and poverty, of commerce and contagion. By exploring the material remains of this era, we gain a deeper understanding not only of how the wealthy lived, but of the forces that reshaped their world. When the plague struck, no one was truly immune. The grand houses fell silent, the streets emptied, and even the guilds lost their footing. As we reflect on these vanished worlds, we are reminded of the fragility of fortune, the inevitability of change, and the resilience of human endeavor. Thank you for watching. You can find them all over England, tucked away in corners of churchyards, beneath parking lots and under housing estates. Thousands of years of history lie beneath our feet every day, hidden in plain sight. Sometimes, however, the ground gives way, revealing glimpses of what once was. And sometimes archaeologists uncover pieces of the past that serve as a window onto worlds long gone. Such is the case with a cluster of mass graves recently found in East Smithfield, London. The site was originally discovered in 1866, when the construction of London's sewer system revealed rows upon rows of human bones. Among them, archaeologists found the remains of more than 100 young people, but the discovery remained a mystery until 2020, when a new investigation sought to shed light on the site. The bones uncovered in 1866 turned out to be just a small portion of the total. By 2020, excavations had identified 450 potential burials. The bones were disinterred carefully and placed in individual boxes. The researchers uncovered other artifacts too, including a clay pipe, the remnant of a drinking vessel, and a small coin purse filled with pennies bearing the image of King Edward III, who reigned from 1327 to 1377. All told, it was a graveyard likely used between 1348 and 1350, a mere 2 years during the early stages of the plague spread. Yet, in those 2 years, it appears that more than 450 people lost their lives. This, in turn, raised questions about how the bodies were buried and who they belonged to. The answer can be found in the bones themselves. Chemical analysis of the individuals interred in the graveyard showed that many of them were not native to London. Most were born elsewhere in England, while a few came from outside the country, possibly France or Germany. Their remains would not have been buried together if times were normal. But the speed and scale of death caused by the plague led to mass graves dug hastily, accepting bodies from across society. Still, the cemetery did contain some signs of hierarchy. The young were buried with care, placed on their sides with hands folded across their chests. Adults, in contrast, were buried hastily and without ceremony. Some were laid out fully clothed, while others wore only one shoe. The researchers believe these were the remains of London's poor, abandoned as the city struggled to cope with the onslaught of death. That they were remembered at all is a testament to the work of archaeologists. Even today, cemeteries from the time of the plague are rarely complete. Bodies were often exhumed, moved, and lost. With careful excavation and scientific analysis, researchers are able to piece together this history. And so, in a way, the dead have found their voices, speaking to us across the centuries. These voices, however, are not merely those of victims. Recent excavations in Cyprus have unearthed the remains of a cat and a dog buried alongside a human skeleton. Archaeological evidence suggests that the animals were not sacrificed, but rather cherished members of the family who died of natural causes. Just as archaeologists have uncovered the resting places of humans and their animal companions, so too have they unearthed clues about daily life during the plague. In cemeteries from the period, the soil often contains high concentrations of ash. Analysis of the ash has shown that many people were cremated, suggesting that cooking fires were used not only for meals, but for burning waste and disinfecting homes. Excavations in the English town of Hemioch, meanwhile, uncovered the contents of a well. Inside were hundreds of objects, including a pewter plate bearing the image of the Virgin Mary, a knight's badge, and even the handle of a man's purse. These items were likely discarded or thrown out a window in an effort to rid homes of contamination. In 14th century England, people believed that plague-ridden air could infect an entire household. Objects like bed curtains and clothing were boiled or burned, and entire rooms were fumigated with the scent of herbs and flowers. The objects in the well may have been contaminated by association. They may also have been deliberately dropped in the well as part of a ritual designed to banish sickness. These artifacts, so casually discarded, provide a glimpse of everyday life during the outbreak, capturing not only the panic and fear of the time, but also the efforts people undertook to try to stay safe. We learn of medical practices used to treat the symptoms of infection, such as bloodletting and leeching, as well as the beliefs surrounding death and burial. Even more valuable, perhaps, are the objects that did not survive. Archaeologists know that houses were abandoned in the midst of the outbreak, that people fled rural areas for cities, and that trade and manufacturing slowed or stopped in many regions. All of these shifts in activity leave their own kind of mark, buried in the layers of earth beneath our feet. The archaeology of the Black Death is particularly compelling because it touches on both large-scale historical forces and deeply personal moments. Amidst the mass graves, one might pause to consider the life of a single individual, the belongings they left behind and the story they have to tell. The meticulous work of archaeologists brings those stories to the surface, allowing us to hear the voices of those who lived through one of the deadliest plagues in history. While the study of plague cemeteries has contributed greatly to our understanding of the Black Death, its impact on art, literature, and culture is equally profound. Paintings from the period depict crowded scenes of death and suffering, such as Our World in Peril by Peter Bruegel the Elder. The artwork shows villages surrounded by tombstones, with skeletal figures reaping the lives of the population. In literature, the plague inspired works like Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare, which depicts the effects of plague on the city of Verona. Music, too, was impacted by the plague, with composers such as Giovanni Pierluigi da Palestrina writing masses that reflected the solemnity of the time. The cultural response to the plague was not limited to the 14th century. Writers throughout history have drawn inspiration from the pandemic, with works such as Camus' The Plague or Stephen King's The Stand reimagining the social and psychological effects of disease. In each case, the response is deeply informed by the context of its creation. During the 14th century, for example, art and literature often depicted religious themes, a reflection of the widespread belief that the plague was God's punishment. Later works, set against the backdrop of World War II and the Cold War, carry echoes of these earlier responses, while also reflecting anxieties about modern disease and societal collapse. Through art, literature, and music, the impact of the plague transcends its historical context, becoming a universal exploration of humanity's encounter with death and suffering. To explore the multifaceted legacy of the Black Death, it's crucial to examine not only its immediate impact, but also its lasting influence on culture and thought. By doing so, we gain a deeper understanding of how this catastrophic event continues to shape our world. In literature, the Black Death found a powerful voice in Boccaccio's Decameron. Set during the plague in Florence, the story follows a group of young adults who escape the city and tell stories to pass the time. The Decameron provides a vivid portrayal of the plague's impact on daily life, as well as a commentary on human nature in the face of adversity. Drama was also profoundly affected by the plague, with Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet offering a haunting reflection on death and loss amidst a backdrop of plague-ridden Verona. Music, too, bore witness to the plague's impact, with composers like Giovanni Pierluigi da Palestrina incorporating themes of mortality and spirituality into his masses and motets. Visual arts also grappled with the plague's legacy, with artists like Peter Bruegel the Elder depicting the devastation and suffering caused by the disease. Bruegel's painting Our World in Peril, for instance, portrays a world ravaged by the plague, with skeletal figures reaping the lives of the population. In more recent times, writers have continued to draw inspiration from the plague's history, Works like Albert Camus' The Plague and Stephen King's The Stand reimagine the social and psychological effects of a pandemic, reflecting contemporary anxieties and experiences. Each artistic response, whether in literature, music, or visual arts, offers a unique perspective on the plague's enduring legacy, inviting viewers and readers to contemplate the human condition in the face of disease and suffering. The Black Death not only reshaped European society, but also left an indelible mark on global history. Its impact on demographics, economies, and artistic expression serves as a reminder of the profound ways in which pandemics can shape our world. As we reflect on the legacy of the Black Death, we gain insight into the resilience, creativity, and adaptability of human societies in the face of extraordinary challenges. The Black Death stands as a stark reminder of the fragility of human existence and the devastating consequences of disease. By studying its history, we not only pay tribute to those who suffered and perished, but also gain a deeper understanding of the forces that have shaped our world. Through the stories of individuals and communities, as well as the artistic and cultural responses to the plague, we can better appreciate the complexity and resilience of human experience in the face of adversity. The legacy of the Black Death compels us to confront the realities of disease and suffering head-on, while also celebrating the indomitable spirit of humanity and its capacity for adaptation and survival. So let me ask you, what do you think? Does this sound like a place you'd want to live? How about this? Imagine yourself stepping into a narrow street. It is early morning, but already the city is stirring. The sound of footsteps echoes off the stone walls, and wooden shutters creak open one by one. The street is uneven beneath your shoes, cobbled in places, muddy in others. Rain from the night before has left shallow puddles, reflecting the pale light of dawn. Around you, the houses lean close together. They are built tall and narrow, sometimes tilting slightly forward, as if pressing toward the street itself. The upper stories jut out above you so that the sky seems narrower here, a thin ribbon of light between timbered walls. There is little silence. The cries of vendors rise quickly, fishmongers calling out their catch, bakers urging the crowd toward their warm bread, smiths striking their hammers against iron. The rhythm is constant, a clatter and hum that fills every corner. The air is thick with smells. Fresh bread mingles with the sharp tang of smoke, the earthy scent of damp timber, and the less pleasant odors of waste. Chamber pots are emptied from windows, and refuse is swept toward the center of the street. The city's drains are crude, and the mingling of smells is inescapable. As you walk, you feel the press of people. The streets are narrow, and everyone shares the same space, merchants carrying baskets, children running underfoot, apprentices on errands and animals weaving through the crowd. Carts creak slowly forward, their wheels grinding into the mud, while chickens dart between boots. Step inside a home and you find little relief. The space is cramped, often just a single room for an entire family. The floor is packed earth, sometimes scattered with straw. A hearth burns in the center, its smoke drifting upward through a hole in the roof. The warmth is welcome, but the smoke clings to everything, saturating your hair, your clothes, your breath. Furniture is sparse. A rough table, a bench or two, and a bed that may be shared by several members of the family. Privacy is almost non-existent. Conversations, meals, and rest all unfold in the same small space. The rhythm of life is communal, and solitude is rare. Work, too, is unending. For most, life means rising early, laboring through the day, and collapsing into sleep only when night demands it. Apprentices learn their trades through long hours, their hands raw from practice. Women manage households, fetching water, cooking, washing clothes by hand, and tending to children. Men labor in workshops, at forges, or behind counters in small stalls. The diet is simple but repetitive. Bread is the constant, sometimes coarse and dark, sometimes finer if the family can afford it. Cheese, dried fish, and porridge fill the table. Meat is rare, a luxury reserved for feast days or the wealthy, and always there is the shadow of illness. Coughs echo through narrow alleys, fevers rise without warning, and life is fragile. With no clean water supply, disease spreads quickly. Even a small cut or infection can turn fatal in the days before reliable medicine. Still, life continues. Children play with simple toys, rolling hoops or tossing carved bones. Neighbors gossip in doorways. Church bells mark the hours, drawing everyone's attention to the rhythm of worship and reminding the people of order beyond their own struggles. For the townsfolk, this is the rhythm of existence, noise and work, crowding and discomfort, fleeting joys balanced by constant worries. It is a life lived not in comfort, but in endurance. And yet, as you stand in that medieval street, you realize that for them this was simply life. The sounds, the smells, the hardships, and small pleasures alike were the only world they knew. Which one of those descriptions sounded more interesting to you? I'll bet that the first one did. So why don't we start our journey back in time by exploring what it would have been like to visit a town during the Middle Ages? You awaken before dawn, your room still dark, the only sound your own breathing and the occasional cough from someone down the hall. Outside, the first hints of day are just touching the rooftops. Your time traveler's equipment tells you that it's around 4 a.m., but there's no way to know that here. There are no clocks or watches. The rooster hasn't crowed yet and the sun isn't up, but something stirs outside your window, some small sounds that hint at the coming day. In the darkness, you hear the creak of a wooden shutter somewhere nearby, then another and another. One by one, the shutters are opening, revealing dim rectangles of light in the dark walls. It's time to rise. You throw back your own blankets, shiver in the chill of the pre-dawn air and pad to the window. You pull back the shutter a bit and peer out. What you see does not resemble any town you've ever known. You are in a medieval town, and it's a world away from yours. The closest thing to a road is a narrow street, paved with uneven stones and sticky with mud. Rain fell last night and it hasn't stopped. To get from one side of the town to the other, you'd need to cross a rickety wooden bridge that spans a shallow stream choked with weeds and refuse. On the far side, another street forks off to the right, disappearing into a maze of timbered buildings. Everywhere you look, the walls of the houses lean close together. Some are built tall, their upper floors jutting out over the street like heavy eyelids. Between them, the sky is narrow, a sliver of light between high walls. Others are short and stout, their gabled roofs sagging with age. Along the street, the ground is slick with mud and strewn with trash, chamber pots, slops from butcher shops, spoiled fruit and swill from tavern refuse. Animals weave through the crowd, dodging feet and carts, and chickens peck at fallen scraps. There are few signs of modern conveniences here. People carry water from a well in clay or metal containers. Trash is thrown into the street where it mingles with the slop and mud. If you're lucky, you won't step in it. If not, though, be prepared for a less than pleasant surprise. And everywhere you look, people mill about. Medieval towns could house anywhere from a few hundred to a few thousand people, crowded together in close quarters. Life in a medieval town wasn't easy. Poverty was widespread, food was scarce, and life expectancy was low. Your best chance at a long life was to leave as a young person and join a monastery, a religious community where you could receive a good education, eat regular meals, and avoid the worst of society's ills. But unless you had faith in God, this probably wasn't appealing. Most people worked hard their whole lives hoping to earn enough money to retire comfortably. For many, that dream never came true. Disease was widespread, thanks to a lack of clean water, sewage, and basic medical knowledge. Small cuts could easily become infected and lead to gangrene. A fever might come and go, or it might kill you. There was no telling. If you got sick, your best chance for survival was the help of a physician, but even they could do little more than apply leeches and recommend bed rest. Life in a medieval town could be dangerous. Violent crime was common and law enforcement was limited, so you might end up caught in the middle of a brawl, or worse, a riot. Also, fires were common, helped along by the wooden buildings and the fact that people often cooked indoors with open flames. Be careful with matches around here. If you needed to defend yourself, you were usually on your own. While some towns hired watchmen to patrol the streets at night, that was rare, so most people carried a knife or a mace to fend off attackers. But you wouldn't want to travel alone after dark, because in the flickering lamplight or moonlight, evil lurked. Bandits and murderers prowl the shadows, looking for someone just like you to make their acquaintance. The medieval period lasted from the 5th to the 15th centuries, which means it covered quite a chunk of time. During that span, Europe went from being primarily rural to having large cities. Thus, depending on when and where you time traveled, you might find yourself in a fairly small village or a sizable urban area. Either way, there would be few places to explore. Houses lined the streets and were separated by tiny gardens or patches of weeds. Beyond the houses, a field might stretch away from the town until it met a forest or hills. Rivers provided a source of drinking water and a place to wash clothes. But the one thing you'd never find was a bathroom. Sanitation was virtually non-existent in medieval towns. People rarely bathed, and the only toilets were the few public latrines near the center of town. Otherwise, people relieved themselves wherever they happened to be. This led to plenty of smells and even more flies. If you visited a market, you'd likely find vendors selling their wares in stalls made of wood or canvas. Some of the goods would look familiar, like fresh vegetables, loaves of bread, and bundles of herbs. Other items would seem exotic, like saffron, ginger, and pepper, spices that were imported from Asia and cost a pretty penny. And while you're shopping, you might notice something else strange: dogs. Packs of stray dogs roamed medieval towns, scavenging for food and generally getting underfoot. They might look cute now, but back then they were considered pests. No one took care of them, so they often became vicious and aggressive. If you felt brave, you might throw a rock at a dog and watch it slink away. If you weren't so lucky, though, you might find yourself surrounded by a snarling pack. So now the question is, how do you escape? Don't worry, I got it. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.